Welcome to Pillow Tales. I'm so glad you've joined us tonight for a journey into quiet deduction. Before we begin, please tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It's lovely to know where our little community of quiet listeners extends. The autumn of 1928 draped itself over the English countryside with a heavy cloak of mist and stillness. It was to this profound quiet that we travelled, my friend Hercule Poirot and myself, Captain Hastings. Our invitation was not a desperate cry for immediate help, but a simple, elegant luncheon request from an old acquaintance, a request which Poirot deemed infinitely more intriguing because it hinted at a challenge. Our destination was Blackwood Manor, a place of deep, silent stone and even deeper history, nestled in the green heart of Wiltshire. It was the ancestral seat of Sir Julian Blackwood, a collector of art and antiquities whose passion was as vast as his fortune, though perhaps not quite as secure. Sir Julian, a man of imposing height but rather delicate health, had recently acquired the crowning jewel of his collection, the Eye of Selene. This was not merely a large diamond. It was a sapphire of such perfect, unearthly blue that it was said to hold the very light of the moon captive within its facets. It was worth an astronomical sum, and naturally Sir Julian insisted that Poirot, in his capacity as a consultant on matters of perfect security, should come and admire his protective measures. Poirot, of course, was delighted by the challenge implied in the word perfect. The object of our visit was displayed in the manor's private study, a room lined with ancient, leather-bound books that smelled of time and dry leaves. The Eye of Selene rested on a pedestal of dark velvet inside a custom-made solid oak display case, secured by a lock of Swiss manufacture, heavy and complex. Furthermore, the base of the case was covered in a deliberate, fine layer of dust, Sir Julian's own ingenious security measure, designed to capture the slightest trace of a hand or a disturbing breath. The other inhabitants of Blackwood Manor, and our suspects for this impending drama, were present at that fateful luncheon. 5 individuals, each orbiting Sir Julian with a mixture of dependence and impatience. First, Lady Beatrice Blackwood, Sir Julian's only daughter. Her striking, fashionable appearance could not quite mask the sharp worry in her eyes. It was known that the Blackwood fortune was now critically depleted. Lady Beatrice, engaged to a man who required a substantial dowry, was desperately awaiting her inheritance. Her motive was clear: financial salvation. Second, Mr. Silas Vance, the sharp-featured, meticulous curator of Sir Julian's entire collection. Mr. Vance lived and breathed the treasures of Blackwood Manor, but he was perpetually overlooked and underpaid. He was the one who personally dusted the display case every morning, and who knew every weakness in the manor's security. Motive was opportunity and a desire to possess the beauty he only served. Third, Mrs. Charlotte Thorne, the retired head housemaid, a fixture of Blackwood Manor for 40 years. She still lived in a small cottage on the grounds and carried a quiet, brooding resentment, hinted at by whispers of a past betrayal involving Sir Julian's late wife. Her motive was a deep, slow-burning revenge for an unknown, ancient slight. Fourth, Lord Harrington, a neighbouring aristocrat, amiable but known for his devastating losses at the gaming tables. He was indebted to several dangerous parties, and his family estate was perilously close to being sold. His motive was sheer, blinding desperation. And finally, Dr. Elias Thorne, Mrs. Thorne's son, a brilliant, quiet man who was employed as the manor's personal botanist. He was devoted to his mother and deeply conscious of his family's lower status. His motive was protection and perhaps a hidden debt. As the heavy mist outside seemed to press against the leaded windows, Poirot complimented Sir Julian not on the gem's beauty, but on the flawless, undisturbed appearance of the fine layer of dust on the display case. Magnifique, Sir Julian! The dust! It is the perfect witness. It has not been disturbed, not a souffle upon its surface. The study door was then locked, the key placed beneath the grandfather clock, and the small party retired to the drawing-room for coffee. The eye of Selene was left gleaming, safe behind its perfectly untouched veil of dust. It was precisely 3:00 p.m. The perfect setup for an impossible crime was complete. 2. The crime discovered. The afternoon passed in the lazy, well-fed manner of a country house party. Talk drifted from the political troubles of the continent to the latest archaeological scandals. Poirot, ever attentive, was engaged in a lengthy, meticulous discussion with Dr. Elias Thorne about the fragile nature of rare orchids. At 5:00 p.m. precisely, Sir Julian announced, with a theatrical flourish, that it was time to retrieve his prize. He insisted on a grand reveal, declaring, "Let us look once more upon the vanishing moonlight before the actual moonlight outside renders it pale." He led the 5 guests back to the study. The atmosphere was still and expectant. Sir Julian located the key where he had hidden it beneath the grandfather clock, a heavy, elaborate brass key, and inserted it into the Swiss lock. The lock turned with a satisfying, expensive click. Sir Julian lifted the heavy oak lid of the display case. All 5 guests leaned forward to admire the glorious, cold fire of the sapphire. But there was no fire. There was only the dark, flawless black velvet pedestal. The eye of Selene was gone. A deep, collective gasp filled the room. Sir Julian's face, already pale from his ailment, turned the colour of parchment. His hand, clutching the heavy lid, began to tremble violently. Then came the second, more chilling realization. The fine layer of dust laid so carefully across the base of the cabinet was absolutely, perfectly undisturbed. No scrape, no fingerprint, no sign of disturbance whatsoever. The gem had vanished from a locked, sealed, and dust-covered chamber, with the key held by the host, and under the noses of 5 people who had been within earshot of the study door for 2 hours. "It is an illusion," gasped Lady Beatrice, her hand flying to her mouth. "It is murder, madame," Poirot corrected gently, his eyes already sweeping the room, bright and cold. "The perfect, silent murder of an object. The crime is not merely the theft, but the impossibility of the method." Sir Julian, overcome by the shock, crumpled onto a nearby leather armchair, clutching his chest. Dr. Thorne rushed to his side, administering a small glass of tonic from his own pocket-case. Poirot, meanwhile, took charge of the scene, his tiny figure seeming to fill the entire vast study. "Nobody moves, nobody touches. Hastings, please, the doors. They must be sealed. This dust, it is our witness. We must treat it with the reverence of a fragile human soul." Poirot's first move was to examine the lock. It was a beautiful, complex mechanism, but flawless. He confirmed that no tools had been used. The lock had simply been opened and closed with the original key. The impossibility of the crime was now formally established. The lock. Only Sir Julian possessed the key, which was hidden beneath the clock. The time. The gem vanished between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m., while the house was under constant, quiet scrutiny. The dust. The fine layer of security dust on the oak base and surrounding furniture was absolutely untouched. "Tell me, Monsieur Vance," Poirot asked the curator, who was trembling with professional shock, "how often do you dust this cabinet?" "Every morning, Monsieur Poirot. I use a fine camel hairbrush to lay the thinnest layer of proprietary anti-static dust. It is sensitive to the lightest touch, a perfect, silent alarm." Poirot leaned in, peering at the powder under his own small silver magnifying glass. He extended a finger to point at one corner of the velvet pad where the sapphire had rested. "And yet, mon ami, look here. The dust is perfect, yes, but the impression where the gem rested, it is too clean. The impression left by the eye of Céline was not just an imprint. It was an area of complete, startling cleanness, as if the gem had simply been vaporized. There was no trace of the dust that should have collected on its facets over 2 hours, despite the fact that dust was everywhere else. "The vanishing is not the crime, Hastings," Poirot murmured to me, his voice barely a breath. The vanishing is the second step. The first step was the introduction of a perfect nothing. The theft had been executed by someone who could touch the gem without touching the dust, and who could open the lock without the key. Or perhaps knew the secret of the manor's security better than the master himself. Pause. 5 seconds. Sound of deep, slow clock ticking, rhythmic and soothing. 3. Investigation begins. Poirot began his methodical investigation, starting not with the suspect's motives, but with the physical impossibility of the crime. The dust was the key. The problem is not where the gem went, but how the removal was executed without disturbing this perfect witness, Poirot stated, addressing the 5 suspects now assembled stiffly in the library. He started with the physical parameters of the study itself. The windows were secured and locked from the inside. The chimney was narrow, filled with soot and untouched. The only door was the one Sir Julian had locked. Sir Julian? Poirot asked gently as the host recovered. Is there any mechanism, any secret passage, known only to yourself, by which the study may be entered? Sir Julian weakly denied it. Only the main door, Poirot. I swear it. Poirot then turned his attention to the suspect's movements during the crucial 2-hour window, 3 Tokyo p.m. to 5 to 1 p.m. Lady Beatrice Blackwood claimed she spent the entire 2 hours in the drawing room reading a novel with the drawing room door ajar. She confirmed she could hear the grandfather clock from where she sat. Lord Harrington claimed he was with Lady Beatrice for the first hour, discussing local politics, and then spent the second hour in the main hall, making an urgent, private telephone call to London concerning his debts. This phone call was uncorroborated. Mr. Silas Vance, the curator, claimed he was in the far wing of the manor in the basement vault, conducting inventory. He was entirely alone, and his absence was confirmed only by the incomplete ledger left open on his desk. Mrs. Charlotte Thorne, the retired housemaid, claimed she was outside, pruning roses in the rose garden, a task she insisted on doing herself. This was highly implausible for a chilly autumn afternoon, and she was, crucially, out of sight of the main house. Dr. Elias Thorne, the botanist, had the most verifiable alibi. He spent the time in the orchid house, a glass structure several hundred yards from the manor, tending to a rare, highly volatile hybrid that required constant, exact temperature regulation. He was alone, but his work log and the perfect state of the orchids themselves served as strong circumstantial proof. Poirot was not interested in these obvious alibis. He was interested in the lock and the dust. "Let us discuss the lock, Monsieur Vance," Poirot prompted. "Is the Swiss mechanism truly unique, or is there a vulnerability?" Mr. Vance admitted reluctantly that he had once commissioned a duplicate key after Sir Julian lost the original, a service that required detailed measurements of the lock's interior. He claimed the duplicate was destroyed when the original was recovered, but the seed of doubt was planted. Mr. Vance possessed the necessary knowledge to recreate the key. Poirot then returned to the dust, the ultimate witness. He requested a glass of water and a sheet of white paper. He gathered a small amount of the security dust on the paper and sprinkled it onto the water. The dust floated perfectly on the surface. It was extremely fine and light. "The crime is here, Hastings," Poirot whispered. "It is not a matter of a small hand or a clever tool. It is a matter of physics." He then observed the study itself once more, paying particular attention to the lighting. The eye of Céline had been displayed beneath a single powerful electric lamp, the only modern light source in the room. Poirot looked at Lady Beatrice. "The dust is perfect, madame. But you were reading in the drawing-room. Was the fire roaring?" "Oh yes, Monsieur Poirot. It was a cold day. The fire was large, and the draught through the chimney was quite strong." Poirot nodded, his eyes bright. The draught, a natural air current, would stir any dust. Yet the security dust was undisturbed. This meant that the dust was either immune to air currents, or the draught had been intentionally prevented from entering the study. The contradiction between the strong draught in the chimney and the rest of the old manor, and the perfect stillness of the security dust, was Poirot's first genuine, powerful clue. 4. Clues and red herrings. Poirot began to deploy his red herrings, testing the suspects' reactions and drawing out their buried secrets. The goal was to prove that the impossibility of the crime was a deliberate misdirection. Red herring 1. The secret panel. Poirot pointed to a large, empty space on the bookshelf next to the display case. "There is a gap here, Sir Julian, where a volume of Shakespeare should be. I suggest this missing book conceals a mechanism, a small opening through which a slender instrument could have been inserted to lift the gem." Reaction. Sir Julian was genuinely shocked. Mr. Vance, the curator, however, maintained a rigid, slightly too calm denial. "No secret panels, Monsieur Poirot. That book was sent to be rebound last week. There is no mechanism." Poirot's conclusion. The missing book was a distraction. The gap was a convenient place to hide a small tool temporarily, but the dust confirmed no object had entered the case. Red herring 2. The housemaid's key. Poirot turned to Mrs. Charlotte Thorne. "Mrs. Thorne, You have worked here for 40 years. You know where the spare keys are kept. The keys to the pantry, the wine cellar, the old service entrance. Did you perhaps find or fashion a key that could also access the old Swiss lock, given your intimate knowledge of the manor's workings? Reaction. Mrs. Thorne's hands clenched. She confessed to having a set of keys to the entire house, including the main door and the vault used for cleaning, but emphatically denied having access to the specific Swiss lock, which was new. Poirot's conclusion. Mrs. Thorne's key set confirmed her access to the entire building, a vital detail, but did not solve the locked case. Red herring 3. The moonlight motif. Poirot addressed Lord Harrington. Lord Harrington, the gem is called the Eye of Selene, the moon goddess. The theft occurred in the afternoon, but the thief needed light. Did you not mention during your uncorroborated phone call that you were arranging for a powerful lens or reflector to project moonlight onto the gem's chamber, allowing you to lift it without disturbing the dust, perhaps using a long-distance magnet? Reaction. Lord Harrington stammered, entirely focused on defending his debt and the veracity of his phone call. He became visibly agitated, confirming the desperate nature of his financial ruin, but denying any involvement in the theft method. Poirot's conclusion. This confirmed Lord Harrington's motive, but proved he lacked the technical imagination for the impossible solution. The true clue, the smell of orchids. While everyone was focused on the dust, Poirot leaned down and sniffed the oak lid of the display case, then the interior of the empty velvet pad. He detected a very faint, almost clinical scent. "Dr. Thorne," Poirot called out, fixing his gaze on the botanist. "The display case smells faintly of the rare Vanda coelestis, the blue orchid. I smelled it on your coat earlier. It has a high concentration of ethyl acetate in its sap. This compound is used in laboratories to dissolve certain materials. You were in the orchid house, but did you perhaps bring some of your laboratory work with you?" Dr. Thorne, who had been the picture of calm, finally flushed. I often handle the samples. It is a very powerful scent." Poirot noted the exact timing of the theft, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., and Dr. Thorne's alibi in the orchid house. The perfection of the dust suggests that the thief did not enter the case, but made the gem vanish, Poirot mused. But if the gem vanished, where did it go? Poirot then revealed a crucial, easily overlooked detail about the velvet pad. It was not merely a piece of cloth. It was mounted on a block of highly porous clay. "The crime is here, Hastings," Poirot whispered. "It is not a matter of a small hand or a clever tool. It is a matter of physics. 5. Complications and twists. Poirot now introduced the most complex twist, the double impossibility. Not only had the gem vanished, but the dust remained untouched. Poirot hypothesized that the thief had not removed the gem from the case, but had caused the gem to pass through the velvet and the porous clay base like water through a sieve. This was dismissed by Mr. Vance as madness. Sapphires are one of the hardest substances on earth, Monsieur Poirot. No chemical solvent could reduce it to vapor or a sludge in 2 hours without destroying the velvet. Ah, but the gem is not ordinary, Poirot replied, his eyes twinkling. It is the eye of Celine. Tell me, Sir Julian, is the gem actually a sapphire, or is it an opal, or perhaps a newly discovered synthetic material? Sir Julian confessed a secret. It is an ancient Roman glass forgery, a masterful replica of the original True Eye of Selene, which was stolen from my grandfather 50 years ago. This piece is immensely valuable, but it is not sapphire. It is calcified strontium borate, a material sensitive to powerful, specific chemical reactions. This changes everything. The impossibility of the vanishing gem was only true if the gem were truly a sapphire. As a rare chemical composite, a targeted solvent was entirely possible. Poirot turned back to Dr. Elias Thorne, the botanist. Dr. Thorne, the ethyl acetate from your orchid house, used in high concentration, can liquefy certain calcified compounds. Did you not spend the 2 hours between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. in the orchid house? And did you not have access to a device that could transmit a fine, controlled vapor? Dr. Thorne's denial was frantic. I was tending the Vanda Colestis. I was regulating the temperature. My mother, Mrs. Thorne, can tell you. Poirot turned to Mrs. Thorne. Mrs. Thorne, you were pruning roses outside. Did you see your son? Yes, Monsieur Poirot. I saw him perfectly well inside the glass house. He was using his new steam atomizer to spray a fine mist of disinfectant on the hybrid. I saw the mist filling the glass house. The alibi was confirmed, but it provided the weapon. The steam atomizer, designed for botanical use, could atomize a solvent into a fine, invisible gas. But how did the gas get from the orchid house to the locked study, miles away, without disturbing the dust? And why the 10 chapters? Poirot now introduced the final perplexing twist. The dust was deliberately not disturbed. He returned to the empty pedestal. The gem vanished through the base, melted by a solvent gas. The gas was delivered by Dr. Thorne's atomizer, but the gas needed 2 hours to liquefy the strontium borate, and it needed a delivery conduit. Poirot asked Mr. Vance, the curator, if there was any unusual feature beneath the display case. Mr. Vance, pale and defeated, admitted, "Yes, Monsieur Poirot, The pedestal is hollow. It contains the wires for the single electric lamp that illuminates the gem. The wires run through the floor and into the manor's subfloor wiring channel. Poirot's eyes lit up. The lamp, the light that was supposed to make the gem shine, was also the conduit for its destruction. The thief, knowing the fragility of the gem's material, directed the solvent gas through the hollow light pedestal, which acted as an invisible chimney leading directly beneath the porous clay base. The gas rose, dissolved the strontium borate, and the liquid residue was then reabsorbed by the clay base, leaving no trace. But Dr. Thorne was at the orchid house far away. The pipe connecting the orchid house to the study was too elaborate. No, Poirot sighed, tapping his forehead. The solution is not complex plumbing. It is human habit. He looked back at Mrs. Charlotte Thorne, the retired housemaid. Mrs. Thorne, you were out pruning the roses, but you confessed you have the keys to the service entrance and the subfloor utility hatch near the study. Did you perhaps let your son into the subfloor during your pruning excursion so he could connect a temporary hose to the ventilation shaft that ran from the basement to the study? Mrs. Thorne looked at her son, then slowly, tragically admitted, I did, Monsieur Poirot. He only needed 5 minutes. He swore he wouldn't touch the key. Only the vents. The locked room was breached not by a key, but by a mother's loyalty and a botanist's scientific weapon. The crime had been solved, but the solution was too clean. Why the 7 chapters? Poirot still had a deeper secret to uncover. 6. The revelation, Poirot stood before the stunned suspects, his face serious. The method of vanishing. The eye of Celine is known. Dr. Elias Thorne, assisted by his devoted mother, used a vaporized solvent to melt the calcified gem through the porous clay base, funneling the gas via the light pedestal's hollow center. A brilliant chemical crime. However, Poirot paused dramatically, his eyes scanning the faces, looking for the telltale flicker of true guilt, not merely complicity. There is a flaw in this perfect plan. Dr. Thorne, you are a botanist. Your life's work is the preservation of rare, delicate materials. Why did you spend 2 hours meticulously liquefying the gem, only to let it be absorbed and destroyed by the clay base? Dr. Thorne, now completely broken, began to weep. I destroyed it because my mother told me Sir Julian was going to sell the manor and leave her destitute. I destroyed the most valuable asset so he couldn't finalize the sale. A noble, if misguided, act, Poirot conceded. But you are lying, mon cher. The gem is not destroyed. Poirot looked at the floor beneath the display case, where the wires for the lamp disappeared into the carpet. The gem was dissolved, yes, but its essence was collected. The eye of Celine was valuable not for its beauty, but for its unique luminescence. Poirot now addressed Mr. Silas Vance, the curator. Mr. Vance, you were in the vault for 2 hours, alone. You knew the gem was not a sapphire. You knew the financial state of the manor. And you knew Sir Julian was selling, which meant you would be without a collection to tend. I know nothing of chemistry, Vance cried. No, you know nothing of chemistry, Poirot agreed. But you know everything about porosity and absorption. Tell me, monsieur, what is the only material that is both highly absorbent and can be later dehydrated without damaging its luminous properties? Poirot walked to the edge of the study and plucked a small, desiccated sponge from a glass bowl of dried potpourri, a bowl Mr. Vance habitually placed by the door. The gem was dissolved into a concentrated liquid, a chemical slurry. The light pedestal, which served as a chimney, did not lead to the floor, but to a small, hidden hole in the base of the pedestal, leading to the hollow leg of the display cabinet. Poirot pointed to the heavy oak leg of the cabinet. Dr. Thorne's ingenious chemical solvent did not melt the gem into the clay. It melted it into a liquid which drained down the hollow leg directly into a small, highly absorbent sponge, placed there by Mr. Silas Vance earlier that day when he did his morning dusting. The dust, mon ami, was not disturbed because the gem's liquid essence was absorbed downwards by the sponge and later replaced by a simple, clean sponge. Vance knew the timetable of Dr. Thorne's sabotage. Dr. Thorne intended to destroy the gem, but Vance intended to steal its concentrated essence. Vance was the silent partner, the cleaner. He supplied the sponge and the perfect alibi of being in the vault to establish his distance from the crime. He knew that the liquid form of the gem was the most valuable, a luminous, powerful chemical concentrate that could be sold to research labs for far more than the gem's antique value. Vance had used Dr. Thorne's brilliant chemical destruction as the perfect cover for his own high-tech theft. The true thief was the curator, motivated by the greed to possess the unique property of the gem, not just the gem itself. 7. Justice served. Mr. Silas Vance, his composure shattered, pointed a trembling finger at Dr. Thorne. He provided the means of liquefaction. I merely collected the waste. I plan to restore the manor's finances with the sale of the luminous concentrate. Poirot silenced him with a sharp, Gallic gesture. The motive is always simpler than the method, monsieur. Dr. Thorne wished for destruction. You wished for possession. Your crime is the greater, for you manipulated the genuine grief of another man's son. The final, conclusive evidence was in Mr. Vance's quarters. Poirot directed Inspector Japp to retrieve a small, custom-made ceramic jar, cleverly disguised as a jar of polishing compound, tucked beneath Mr. Vance's desk. Inside, they found the highly concentrated viscous blue liquid, the liquid essence of the vanished eye of Celine, ready to be dehydrated and sold. Dr. Elias Thorne, despite his complicity in the act of destruction, was treated with leniency, his intent having been to save his family rather than for personal gain. His mother, Mrs. Thorne, was heartbroken but relieved, the secret of her loyalty now out in the open. Lady Beatrice was initially furious that the gem was destroyed, but Poirot calmed her by explaining the true nature of the strontium barat and the impossibility of a true sapphire theft. "Madame," Poirot said, "your father's forgery was a magnificent piece of chemistry. You have lost a valuable asset, yes, but you have found something far more important, the knowledge that beneath the surface of the commonplace, great secrets are always hiding. Lord Harrington, whose gambling debts had been a powerful red herring, was exonerated, his agitation revealed to be merely the consequence of a bad wager, not a capital offence. Justice, in this case, was served with a soft, scientific certainty. The perfect impossibility was simply a perfect understanding of chemistry and human nature. The dust, the magnificent, silent witness, was never disturbed, because the gem never left the case through the opening. It left through its very essence. Poirot watched as the police secured the evidence, the highly luminous blue liquid glowing faintly even in the subdued light of the study. "It is finished, Hastings. The gem was meant to vanish, to dissolve under the moonlight of human ingenuity. It is only the little grey cells, my friend, that can see the truth hidden within the science." The air in the manor settled back into its customary quiet, now purged of the sharp tension of secrecy. The case of the vanishing moonlight had cast its shadow, but the methodical application of logic had brought the clear light of resolution. 8. The explanation. Later that evening, before the fire in the drawing-room, Poirot gave a final, detailed explanation of the method, meant to soothe and satisfy the minds that had followed the clues so patiently. This is the moment, dear listener, where the final, lingering questions fade away, leaving only peace. The killer, Mr. Vance, required a distraction, a perfect mechanism of destruction that would also enable collection. He found his unwitting partner in Dr. Elias Thorne, the botanist. Poirot explained that Vance had initially suspected Dr. Thorne's resentment of Sir Julian's extravagance, and knew of the doctor's expertise in specialized botanical compounds. and his access to the steam atomizer. Mr. Vance's genius was not in chemistry, but in logistics. He prepared the absorbent sponge, tucking it into the hollow leg of the display cabinet where the lamp wires ran. He knew the clay base was porous and that the single hollow lamp pedestal provided a clear, downward drain. The flaw in Thorne's plan. Dr. Thorne's plan was purely for destruction. He used the atomizer to convert a high-concentration solvent into an invisible, odorless gas. His mother let him into the basement, where he fed the gas through a temporary pipe into the subfloor utility channel, right up to the underside of the study. The gas naturally rose into the chamber beneath the display case. Vance's intervention. The gas then did its work, melting the strontium borate gem into a highly valuable concentrated liquid. Dr. Thorne assumed this liquid was soaking into the clay base, gone forever. But non, Poirot clarified. The liquid found the drain hole in the pedestal's base, flowing directly into the absorbent sponge placed by Vance. Vance knew Dr. Thorne would leave his alibi, the orchid house, before coming to inspect the destruction. This gave Vance the window he needed. Vance left his inventory in the vault, returned to the study alone, replaced the full sponge with a clean one, part of his usual cleaning supplies, and returned to the vault, his alibi intact. The scratch on the dust was avoided because no object was inserted. Only vapor and liquid moved through the case. The true vanishing act, Poirot concluded, was not the gem, but the proof of the gem's survival. Mr. Vance calculated that everyone would focus on the impossibility of the locked room and the simple destruction of the gem. He neglected the brilliance of my little grey cells, which always, always look beneath the surface. The intricate puzzle was now flat and simple, like a child's drawing. The final pieces were assembled, and the logic was sound, leaving no room for doubt. The gentle rain outside continued its rhythmic patter, a sound of cleansing and finality. 9. The aftermath. The evening drew in, and the staff of Blackwood Manor, initially shocked by the drama, returned to the comforting rhythm of their duties. The scent of the dying fire and the distant, clean smell of wet earth drifted in through the open drawing-room window. Sir Julian Blackwood, though devastated by the loss of his prized forgery, was unexpectedly revitalized by the intellectual shock of the crime. The necessity of dealing with the police, the press, and the subsequent insurance inquiries seemed to give him a renewed purpose. He was, after all, a collector of stories as much as he was a collector of objects, and the tale of the last quiet mystery would be his grandest acquisition yet. He sat with Poirot and myself, sipping a light broth, marveling at the audacity of the scheme. "To think, Poirot," he murmured, "that the one man I trusted with my collection, the meticulous Mr. Vance, was simply waiting for the moment of its liquefaction. And young Thorn, whose motive was so pure, or so I thought, was merely the scientist of the crime." Poirot emphasized the importance of Lady Beatrice and her future. While the strontium borat was gone, the story itself would bring attention to the remainder of the Blackwood collection, allowing Sir Julian to sell a few lesser pieces discreetly and secure his daughter's dowry. Justice, Poirot noted, often has softer secondary effects. Dr. Elias Thorne, after providing a full confession, was allowed to remain on the estate under supervision, his unique botanical skills deemed too valuable to discard entirely, and his motive judged to be one of love rather than avarice. His mother, Mrs. Thorne, watched over him with a quiet, fierce devotion. The weight of her secret finally lifted. The manor itself felt cleaner, lighter. The oppressive atmosphere of secrecy and debt had dissipated, replaced by the honest, open air of resolution. The heavy shadows of the library seemed less menacing now that their hidden purpose had been revealed. The case had not been solved by brute force or sensational evidence, but by a quiet, unhurried application of logical deduction. A victory for the little grey cells, and a peaceful end to a truly impossible crime. We prepared to leave Blackwood Manor, leaving behind the manor's history of secrets to settle into the earth like the mist outside. 10. Peace and good night. And now, my dear listener, as our journey concludes, and the last of the secrets of Blackwood Manor have been revealed, it is time for your own quiet descent into rest. We have travelled far, from the sharp logic of the lock to the scientific puzzle of the liquefying gem, and finally to the simple human greed that orchestrated the entire vanishing act. The truth, as always, was hiding in the details, in the porosity of the clay, the subtle scent of an orchid, and the heavy burden of a mother's devotion. Allow the soothing repetition of the soft rain and the distant, slow ticking of the grandfather clock to anchor you gently in the present moment. Feel the weight of the complicated story lifting from your mind, leaving only the pleasant, satisfying memory of a puzzle well solved. The mystery is finished, the excitement is spent, and the only task remaining is to drift. Let the slow, deliberate rhythm of my voice and the quiet, hypnotic music guide you through the deepening shadows of the night. May your sleep be deep, undisturbed, and utterly restorative. Good night.